Seiji, the Sloth of the southern Silklands. Era, the Mourning Century, during the twilight reign of the Glass Emperors. Reputation, called the Sleeping Edge, dust-hung blade, idle Seiji, and half in fear, Godsloth. From the Killer and Keeper universe. He never trained. He never warmed up. He never strode with purpose, only shuffled with the gait of a drunk poet caught in a storm of ennui. His katana, sun-faded and bound in cracked stingray skin, trailed behind him in the dust like the tail of a defeated dragon. Its hamon shimmered like mist over still water. The edge, notched and stained by eras of use, remained unnervingly keen. The tsuba, shaped like a sleeping fox, was dented by disuse more than battle. His kimono was always wrinkled, the indigo worn down to distant thunder gray. A rusted haori hung from his shoulders, sleeves too long, the family crest lost beneath wine stains and weather. Straw sandals flopped on his feet, cords frayed by indifferent miles. A broad-brimmed tsugagasa shaded his face, woven from old rice straw and patched with silk lifted from temple offerings. At his throat dangled a dubious charm, a child's finger bone gilded in gold, beside a bamboo flute he never played. But when he drew, kingdoms fell quiet. Seiji did not duel. He refused. Too much work, he said. When challenged, he rose slowly, as if gravity begged him to reconsider, and offered a bow so lackluster it bordered on insult. Then came the sigh, the weary tilt of the head, the most pitiful, exhausted expression imaginable. To the unwise, it looked like surrender. To the observant, it was an omen. Once, Jiro the Thunderstep sought him out, the warrior who had cleaved a mountain bandit with a single cry. Jiro wore sacred armor blessed by 8 shrines, each to a different virtue. Mercy, fury, balance, silence, flame, stone, wind, and shadow. Lacquered jade shimmered, gold-inlaid prayer scrolls stitched the underlayer. Pauldrons bore shrine guardian faces. A spine of woven silver and phoenix feather ran down his back, and was said to pulse when lies were near. Wherever he walked, the earth remembered, leaving faint, glowing footprints that lingered a few breaths. He carried a cursed nodachi, Raiko no Kiba, the fang of the Thunder Emperor, forged of sky iron during a blood eclipse and quenched in the tears of a blind shrine maiden. Lightning forked along its face, veins of pale fire trapped under tempered steel. Drawn, it made the air heavy, as if the heavens held their breath, and birds forgot how to sing. Raiko no Kiba was no relic. Jiro had hewn the Oni Regent of Gozan Pass with a single upward arc, cleaving beast and gate in twain. In the Year of Hollow Reeds, he silenced the twin priestesses of Waranoheim in a strike so clean the blood bloomed like roses. During the Siege of Sorrows, he decapitated a spirit golem riding a thunder cloud, blade-splitting sky and sin in one motion. The Nodachi whispered its victims' names at night, an eerie litany that invaded Jiro's dreams. He wore his hair tied with ribbons gifted by princesses. Each ribbon held a memory, a soft promise murmured through silk, a night beneath forbidden moonlight, a farewell never spoken. He had not taken them by force, but received them in secret moments from those who called him theirs for an evening. He vowed to return each ribbon when his wars were over, placing them back into waiting hands. They fluttered when he moved, as if remembering for him. "Seiji!" he bellowed across a field of wind-stripped cypress. "Face me and die with honor." Seiji, leaning against a sun-warmed stone, shifted slightly. Die with honor? Sounds crowded. You mock me. I mock everything, he said, brushing a beetle from his shoulder. "Draw your blade, coward." "Fine," Seiji sighed. "You're louder than hunger." What followed was not a duel, but gravity's cruelty. Seiji did not rise. He pivoted, a small twist of the wrist, a lazy extension of the elbow. Jiro folded in half, not broken so much as reconsidered, as if choosing another way to be. A blink later, limbs dropped like overripe persimmons shaken from a tree. Seiji was already seated again, brushing petal dust from his knee. The ribbons drifted loose, catching in branches and skimming the blood-slick field like forgotten prayers. Promises undelivered, nights unlived, goodbyes unspoken. He had a technique. 1. Unnamed, unexplained. Some said the cut began before the thought to strike had fully formed, a motion born of boredom and bone-deep inevitability. Witnesses called it neither fast nor slow, but absent, as if the blade simply decided where things should end. His arm never tensed, his stance never changed. The line moved however it wished, and it never needed a second try. Scholars wrote treatises. No one saw more than a blur and the sudden end. During the siege of Yamamura, he slept on a collapsed bridge, curled like a cat, a plum pit stuck to his cheek. A regiment of black fangs laughed and stepped around him. 10 paces in, they fell. Some sliced, others simply ceased, as if their lives had been negotiated away by a whisper. Seiji never rose. He rolled to one side and muttered that nightmares were too noisy. Later he tricked a band of river thieves, half-drunk louts who'd once tried to rob him, into rebuilding that bridge. He claimed a treasure vault beneath it, sealed by sky mathematics. "Sky what?" one muttered. "Sky mathematics," Seiji said, eyes half-lidded. Math that only works when you're upside down or bored, very advanced. They argued for 2 weeks about imaginary riddles, a sun-shadow code, triangulating wind with spoons, and in their fervor, rebuilt the span while trying to trigger a trap. When they finally crossed, Seiji waved from the opposite hill. "Thanks. My nap needed a view. If it collapses again, you divide it by 0. Seiji slept beneath trees, drank cheap wine warmed by the sun, and once lost his sword for 7 years, shrugging and using a stick instead. It happened during a night with a wandering hermit who claimed to have invented invisible sake. They drank beneath a waterfall that poured upward, or so they later swore, laughing about metaphysics and the price of plum wine. "You ever think swords are just long lies?" the hermit asked. "Only when I'm holding them," Seiji said, already tipsy. They played existential catch, hurling possessions into a gorge to see which returned. "Winner becomes a cloud," the hermit declared, tossing his pipe. Seiji threw his blade. It didn't return. The hermit called it enlightenment. Seiji called it probably gone. The stick killed 7 legendary warriors and 5 demigods, each different, each doomed. Demigod 1, Rukuro of the 100 Hammers, a titan 9 feet tall with obsidian skin cracked by firelight. Rukuro strode out of a shattered volcano, each step leaving molten prints. His breath steamed like furnaces, his voice rumbled like avalanches. He had broken fortresses, bent rivers, crushed rebellions. Drawn by prophecy and pride, he challenged Seiji under an eclipse. "I have broken fortresses with my fists," he boomed, flame flaring with every word. "Ever tried patience?" Seiji muttered from beneath a peach tree. Rukuro charged, one step like a falling colossus, one swing that split the air. Seiji's wrist flicked. The stick kissed his knee with the lazy elegance of a falling leaf. The sound was small but final. The leg buckled, the rest followed, a landslide into silence. Seiji sipped warm wine, grimaced and eyed the fallen giant. "You broke many things," he said softly. "Never stillness." He lay back down. "Next one better bring tea." Demigod. 2. Velna, the bloomed storm. She wielded twin lightning scimitars and moved with a dancer's grace. Stormlight in silver armor, eyes like struck flint, hair like wind-torn banners. She came for retribution, a sister who had loved Seiji's myth, not the man, and died waiting for a word he never spoke. To Velna, stillness was neglect. She found him asleep under a fig tree. "Face me, Sloth," she whispered. "Didn't bring tea, did you?" he mumbled. She struck. He flicked a pebble. It zipped through charged air and tapped her temple, a single sharp note amid thunder. Her blades slipped like betrayed lovers. Her knees went soft. She spiraled down in silver silence. "All that flash," he sighed, nudging a scimitar with his foot, and not even a kettle. He tapped her brow. "Next time, bring tea," and wandered off, muttering about fig trees and tardy thunder. Demigod. 3 Sorrow the Thought Splitter, willowy, robed in mirrored silk that shimmered like thought. Remembering itself, Sorrow fought with illusions, legions of light and shadow humming false thunder, banners twisting as you looked. "You cannot touch me. I am unmade thought." "Good," Seiji said, rubbing his temple. "Then you won't mind being forgotten." One sweep of the stick, and the air howled. Illusions didn't fade, they shattered, glass temples imploding in a vacuum. Sorrow's scream was the sound of intellect dying. The hourglass in his eye cracked and spilled constellations. He scattered like mist, disbelief his last expression. "Should have brought a book," Seiji said, poking the last whiff of starlight. "Too many mirrors, not enough windows." He lay back down. 3 down, still no tea. Demigod 4. Iskai of the verdant coil, a serpent-bodied demigoddess, scales iridescent green and bruised violet, hair a nest of black coils tipped with venomous blossoms. In jungles that worshipped abundance through decay, she was the fertile dread. Orchids bloomed mid-air, venom shone like dew. The jungle hushed to her arrival. "Your death will seed my garden. Hope it's better than your poetry." Her fangs struck first, his stick last. Orchids wept nectar, beetles drummed, mist caught starlight. He yawned, wiped the stick on his sleeve. She withered to moss. "Shame," he said, tucking a fallen orchid behind his ear. "Could have made a lovely garden." He wandered off, humming. The vines curled as if bowing. Demigod 5. Arian the breathless flame, born from the last breath of a village set ablaze. She was a silhouette woven from ember and smoke, a voice of ghost choir harmony. Her followers burned their pasts and sang her name so she would carry their memories skyward. "I am not of flesh. You cannot strike me," she intoned, body spiraling into incense and memory. "Neither is sleep," Seiji said. He waved the stick. Wind scattered her like incense. He coughed. "Too strong, bad blend." And the dragonkin monk. He guarded the temple of the final breath, carved into a cliff where wind never paused, the cradle of stillness and the grave of desire. Halls were paved with the ash of vows. Each bell chime severed attachments. 7 gates tested passage. The gate of murmurs, which devoured lies. The gate of dust, which required shedding possessions. The gate of echoes, which replayed regrets until none remained. The gate of flame, trial of breath and fire. The gate of the unseen step, crossed only blind. The gate of the hollow bell, which rang only for those who had surrendered desire. And the gate of the vanished self, passable only to those who had forgotten their names. Dragons once meditated there until they turned to stone. Colossal forms curled in permanent repose, scales dulled to petrified dusk, moss clinging like shawls, spines jutting like ancient spires. "Speak your last truth, wanderer," the monk said. "I once beat a god at rock, paper, scissors." "Impossible." "Exactly." They fought in silence, a single exchange so swift it could be mistaken for a sigh. The monk moved like breath trapped in thunderclouds, palm slicing toward Seiji's neck. Seiji tilted his head, just so, and the strike passed like a breeze forgetting its purpose. He did not counter, he merely adjusted. The monk landed behind him, steady, eyes wide. He bowed and turned to ash. Seiji bowed back. Should have picked rock. He brushed a finger through the settling dust. "Hope he finds quiet," he said to the temple walls, then glanced at a fossilized dragon's shut eyes. "Still not the weirdest thing I've seen before breakfast." Hands in sleeves, he walked past the 7th gate as if strolling a garden rather than sacred trials. 1. The bridge duel with Orokami, the wind cutter. A famed blade dancer who moved like birdsong and silence, Orokami wore layers of sky-blue silk that fluttered as if carried by invisible music. His blades were thin as dragonfly wings, cloud steel so fine they whistled when unsheathed, and his lacquered windwood mask bore only a painted crescent moon. His duels were ballets, death delivered in haiku footwork. He never left blood, only falling petals. He blocked Seiji's path on an unfinished rope bridge in the northern canyons, a fraying thread between two walls of stone, above mist that rolled like ghost herds, while hawks circled in silence. Planks bowed and creaked. Wildflowers shivered on the cliffside, scattering petals into the abyss like farewells. Seiji stepped onto the bridge like a man entering a bath too warm to care. The wind tugged his sleeves, the planks groaned, and he didn't look down, not from fear, but disinterest. The abyss didn't concern him. The driftwood in his hand did. "If I fall," he thought, "hope the landing's soft." "You carry no blade, Seiji. Have you no shame?" Orokami called. "Only hangovers," Seiji said, and when Orokami attacked with blinding grace, he raised the driftwood and met the dance with indifference. One strike, and Orokami's spine bowed like bamboo in winter. He tumbled into the canyon, whispering, "But I was dancing." In that downward breath, the sting was not death, but that Seiji had not even drawn. A whole art deflected by a shrug. Seiji watched the mist close, murmured, "Dancing's nice, but balance is quieter." Plucked a sky-blue petal, the wind returned, tucked it into his sleeve, and kept walking. Still no tea. 2. The Stone Gate and the Demigod Brothers. Twin demigods, Huro and Yari, stood atop a stone gate carved from the first mountain. Huro, thick as a thunderhead, with basalt skin and molten copper eyes, laughing like falling boulders. Yari, lean and pale as carved ivory, robed in cloud stitch, whispering every word like a secret. Where Huro crushed, Yari pierced. Where Huro bellowed, Yari schemed. Gods of contrast worshipped in opposing temples and feared by the same crowds. Seiji squinted up. "You sure you're twins? One of you looks like a thunderstorm that lost a bet, the other like a whisper that forgot to leave." "You carry a stick, mortal. Do you seek death?" hissed Yari. "No," Seiji said. "Just lunch, unless you serve tea." They struck together, thunder and earthquake, lightning from a whisper, a crack from a charge, and between them Seiji moved his wrist as if brushing away a gnat. No flourish, no war cry, just a flick. Huro folded like a fortress struck by sleep. Yari dissolved into a snowfall of pale petals. The storm passed before it arrived. Dusting his sleeve, Seiji muttered, "Loud twins. Try matching outfits, or at least the same metaphor." 3. The Duel of Drought, Champion of Fire. In the ruins of Suran, once flame-carved spires, sleepless markets, wells that sang, Seiji met Aizen the Ash-Tongued at a dried well. "You are beneath me," Aizen spat. "Most things are," Seiji said. "I lie down a lot." Aizen ignited the air. Flame banners rose. Sand glowed with false dawn. Seiji sighed, stepped sideways, and struck as if brushing dust from a sleeve. The roar froze and shattered. Aizen unraveled into ash. Seiji drank from the well, smacked his lips, and said, "Tastes like ego and cheap wine. Still no tea." 4. The Temple of Bone, the Dragonkin Monk. In a monastery where silence was enforced by death, a monk with scales and no shadow bowed in a courtyard of skulls, stacked like prayer beads and ribs arched to gates. "You disturb sacred air." "I'm winded. Sue me." The monk moved like breath inside thunder. Seiji tapped his staff once. Mid-strike, the monk turned gray and sifted to bone dust. Seiji sneezed, rubbed his nose, traced a lazy line in the powder, and wandered on, more irritated by the sneeze than the battle. 5. The Ice Docks of Varka. A warrior queen with an axe carved from glacial grief stood astride her frozen fleet, famed for battles on cracking seas, called the Frost Widow, breaker of fleets. "Your name is Myth. Prove it," she said. "Myth is just a nap that got too long," Seiji answered. They fought on black ice under bruised aurora. Ships lay entombed, masts jutting like broken spears. Seiji slipped, spun, struck. She shattered like glass, remembering warmth. He skated away on a barrel lid, breath blooming white. "All that legend," he said, watching her fragments glint like small stars, and still no tea. 6. The Sleepless Arena. In a city cursed never to dream, the sleepless arena never closed. Lamps never dimmed, eyes never shut. Cheers rasped from hunger and despair as a champion called 1100 Fists challenged Seiji. "You'll find no rest here." "Then I'll make some." They clashed. The crowd blinked. The champion had no fists left. Seiji looked up at the hollow faces and sighed. "Maybe now you'll blink longer." That night, the city slept. Torches guttered as if weary. The sands exhaled hoarded heat. Statues sagged in relief. Iron gates groaned shut. And for one night, the arena dreamed too. 7. The Golden Orchard Duel, the Whisper Moon, phantom assassin of courts and taverns, a necklace of silenced rulers for a legend, tried to kill him mid-yawn. "You'll die in your sleep, Sloth." "Wouldn't that be lovely?" He blocked with a plum branch. She fell with petals in her mouth. He ate the plum, licked juice from his thumb, and scowled. "Bit sour, and no one brings tea." Asked who trained him, Seiji said, "No one. Too tiring." The key to swordsmanship. Short arms, less to move. He never took pupils. Petitioners who begged for secrets were waved away. If you need a stick to learn stillness, you're already too loud. The Emperor once offered him a throne. Seiji fell asleep during the ceremony. Courtiers froze. Poets invented excuses. The Emperor only murmured, perhaps to himself, "Maybe this is the only loyalty worth having, rest," and dismissed the court while Seiji snored on the throne. Some claimed his art was closer to entropy than technique, that he found the flaw between intent and action and slept inside it, a blade moving against the very idea of effort. No one knew. Before the era ended, he stood at the edge of the world before a beast that devoured sleep, yawned, and the beast never opened its eyes again. Later his blade was found embedded in a plum tree, rusted and undisturbed. Near it lay a note in lazy, half-legible ink. Bored now. Dreaming's better. If I wake, don't call me. Of Seiji's childhood. The days before motion. Before he was called the Sleeping Edge. Before men wrote treatises on how to avoid waking him. Seiji was the son of a peasant widow in the rice-rot lowlands of Enbara, in a village called Mudbone. He was born in the year of the red locusts, when even birds were too tired to sing, and the sun hung mildewed in the sky. Slack-jawed and silent, he came into the world without a cry. The midwife slapped him twice and said, "Either he's slow-witted or a sage." He didn't walk until 5, not for lack of strength, simply because he didn't care to. He would lie in his reed cot, blinking once a minute, as if the world might improve, if ignored long enough. By 7, he was infamous for not doing things. He did not fish, did not fetch water, did not play. When forced into the harvest, he lay down and let crows pick grain from around his body. "The wind will sort the rice eventually," he said. The other children mocked him until the headman's son threw a stone that split Seiji's brow. Seiji stood, slow as tide, circled the boy once, snapped a bamboo shoot with one finger, touched it to the boy's chest, and whispered, "If you breathe, I win." The boy collapsed, sobbing, and never met Seiji's eyes again. When his mother drowned in a flood, dragged off by river snakes, Seiji did not weep. He sat on the broken roof for 3 days, while the village mourned below. On the 4th, a monk came looking for bodies. Seiji handed him a bundle of ash and said she didn't want to be wet forever. The monk took him to a mountain shrine where the air was clean and the work endless, splitting wood, hauling stone, meditating beneath cold waterfalls. Seiji did none of it. Lashings, fasts, and buckets of water poured over his sleeping head accomplished nothing. He snored through their discipline. At 11 he wandered into the Hall of Arms, took down a blade not meant for boys, held it loose and wrong. A senior monk barked. Seiji turned, moved, one cut. The monk's belt fell in 2 and his robes puddled around his ankles. They did not teach him after that. They watched him. By 13, he slept in the rafters and whispered to clouds. At 15, he cut lightning during a storm, not for defense or glory, only because it woke him. Artists tried to sketch him and found their hands numb, brushes heavy, eyelids leaden. His childhood did not end in a moment, but in a shrug. At 17, he left the temple without farewell and carved on his straw pillow, "You made it too hard to nap." The first kill, on the road to nowhere. He was 18, perhaps 19. Time slid off him like sweat on lacquer. He had been walking south for days or weeks, following no road, only the slant of wind over dike and paddy, and the faint salt on his tongue. The sea breathed somewhere ahead. His straw hat, patched with temple thread, and a petal of old silk, leaked light in coin-sized dots. Dust filmed his lashes. Sandal cords bit grooves into his ankles. Temple rags, the color of old bruises, hung stiff with dried rain and incense ash. A small fingerbone charm knocked softly at his throat. The man who would die was Korematsu, a bandit wanted across 6 provinces for torching tax barges on the Reedway, ambushing the Blue Lantern payroll at Sparrow Bend, desecrating the Grey Mother's shrine at Willow Ford, selling caravan children to the salt hands, and starving towns by burning their granaries. Tall, fast, proud, he carried 2 curved swords and talked to them like pets, calling himself Rain Splitter, though his last victims were women and the old. Bounties stacked accordingly. Enbra offered 120 glass suns and remission of 1 season's river levy, reed march, 80 T-bricks, and a lifetime ferryman's pass. Komekawa, 150 lantern marks and a sealed debt forgiveness. Chit. Kagan, 60 T-bricks, to the temple granary, and the Grey Mother's absolution writ. The Hans Coast, 200 salt chits and a salvage writ for 1 low-tide wreck. Drought Plain, 100 glass suns, 30 T-bricks, and frontier land scrip along any surveyed canal. Kor found Seiji under a collapsed gatehouse, a salt-bitten toll arch of worm-silvered beams and flaked imperial crests. Lying on his side, chewing a stem of black grass, sword half-buried as if forgotten. He demanded coin, blade, pants, and kneeling. The arch threw his voice back twice, swallows startled, and a feather fell like a lazy omen. Seiji thought, he wants me to stand. Standing is tribute. Without looking up, he asked, what if I pretend I didn't hear that? In his head, if I answer, I have to stand. If I stand, I owe the day a purpose. Kor kicked dust in his face. The grass stem snapped. Grit tasted of brick and mouse piss. The wind leaned south by east, a useful thing. A flicker. Left heel light. Scabbard mouth warm. The man breathing on the upbeats. One motion, or none. Kor's legs folded wrong. He slumped like a puppet with its strings cut. Seiji had not risen and had not fully drawn. He only shifted weight, steel meeting flesh with the drama of a sigh. The cut traveled like a yawn from wrist to shoulder to quiet. He thought, next time I won't move at all. Blood arced lazily across the pebbled road. Sun lit it like thin tea. Louder next time, Seiji muttered, plucking a fresh stem. If you wake me, pay for the privilege. He left the body where it fell. Searching makes lists. Lists make promises. Promises wake you up. The first kill went unwitnessed and unsung, but it whispered across the land like rot through a temple floor. That night, under the toll arch, he tried to remember the man's name and chose not to. Forgetting proved lighter than sleep. The Worm Coast, feast of the Blade Eaters. The Worm Coast was where swords went to die. Cliff-torn headlands and black tides full of bones. Knife reefs called the Swordbreakers, combing the surf into ragged white. Basalt chimneys smoked with cold spray. Tar seeps turned coves to poured ink. Sea caves fluted when the wind swung west. Iron sand beaches glittered where waves ground spearheads to grit. Inland, heaths of salt wormwood and thorn gorse lay under wind-stunted pines that hunched like old fighters. The currents had names: Widow's Reach, The Throat, Saint's Misstep. And the weather had tempers: torn linen fog in spring, knife rain in autumn, and winter scream winds that peeled paint from boats. Shorefolk lived here too, not only the Blade Eaters. Called Skarners inland, they tattooed tide lines on their wrists and braided hair with fishbone pins. Stilt houses stood over flats, and rope bridges stitched neighborhoods like nets. Children swam before they walked. Everyone could mend a sail, set a bone, and read a bell in fog. Trade ran in salt chits, iron pebble ingots smelted from black sands, and drift-right tokens that granted whatever the sea returned. Oaths were tied in cords before witnesses and burned when kept. Storm bells hung over doors, once for warning, twice for welcome, thrice for the dead. The drowned saints ate broth and bone tea at low tide. Wrecker's Law was scripture: no false beacons in a gale, no cutting a found line, thirds to sea, salvers, and shrine. Festivals came hard and quick. Blackwater night of floating torches, lantern threading with glass floats sewn in red string. The 9 wakes of sung dirges that end in laughter because the sea keeps what it wants. They ate char kelp and eel pies with sour apple chutney, smoked razor gull, thick broth boiled on whale oil. Bone rites carved saints from Leviathan rib. Bell founders cast low bells heard underwater. Kelp scribes made rain-legible parchment. Rope masters knotted mathematics. Sailors swore could remember a wind. Their daughters and sons included Erie of the tide marks, last true tide oracle. Admiral Koji Reef Fox, who mapped Saint's misstep with kite lanterns. Kaya Bonewright, who raised a chapel in a beached Leviathan. Hansa of 12 knots, whose rope proofs freed a besieged harbor. Rook Ulen, bell founder, whose drowned bells toll only for liars. And Ashen the Salt Widow, poet of the 9 wakes. The Blade Eaters named their own saints. Tooth Mother Syaru, first to swallow steel, and Old Gar, who said rust was the sea remembering a sword. He reached their shrine fort, a seaside bastion patched from half-ships and jawbone totems, seeking only a dry place to nap. Once it had been Tidewatch Bastion, raised by Hansa stewards to tithe wreckers and keep lanterns burning. After the Black Famine, it was abandoned to salt and debt. Widows stripped copper, gulls took rafters, storms wrote new doors through the sea-facing wall. Koji's kite lantern mast had mapped currents here. Later the Blade Eaters set Leviathan jaws for gates and nailed rust prayers to the arch. Under sand, the old altar to the drowned saints still sweated brine on moonless nights, and a cracked bell from Rook Ulen's foundry lay in the yard, said to toll once when a lie crossed the threshold. In the year of hollow reeds, fire ate the records, a gale ate the roof, and the sea ate the ash. The headland kept its name, Widow's Bench, where lantern watchers counted boats that wouldn't come home. They smelled his steel and hungered for it, calling him Sleepwalker of the North, though he'd given no name. 20 ringed him on the salt-bleached beach, faces in ossuary white and rust red, teeth filed to chisels, lips tar black, scalps threaded with fishbone pins. Cord oaths looped their throats, shark vertebrae circled wrists, ship plate and Leviathan hide-armored shoulders and shins. Netted sashes sagged with hooks and keys. Bell anklets, tamped with kelp, kept their steps dumb. They carried a midden of storms, sawback cleavers, tooth-stitched dirks, reef-iron machetes, a mast-tall harpoon, coral-studded clubs, and for each a bite blade gritted between molars. Their leader, Tooth-daughter Natsu, war mother of the 8th Maw, nose cut away by the rust-fast, fingerbones grafted as votive relics, lifted her rust prayer and spat, "We will eat your blade and dream your deaths for 100 years." Seiji sprawled on driftwood, stared up at the corpse-heavy gulls and yawned. "I'd rather you didn't. I just sat down." They charged, and the world hushed. Wind fell off the sea, gulls hung mid-wing, tar stopped popping, breath drew down, and did not return. In that held moment, even war shrieks were only echoes waiting for a throat. Seiji stood without stirring sand, a flick of foot, a shrug of shoulder, a blade unsheathed by gravity and disinterest. The sword whistled once. Jori Ulen's third, a bell founder's son with copper blank wired to his anklet, opened his mouth to shout, and heard a single tired chime. He looked for the bell, not the cut, and found neither. Fen of 3 knots, a net weaver girl with a bone thimble and a red ribbon for a sailor sister upriver, took the first step of a taut charge, and only the thimble finished it, spinning to rest in the sand. Oren Hook left raised the harpoon, as if hauling a breathless catch, and folded with the care of a man laying a tool aside. Sable Kith, lips cut to a permanent smile for wrecking the wrong ship, hummed the fourth wake. Half the note reached daylight, half stayed in her throat, a quiet she finally owned. Natsu's rust prayer broke on a consonant. Extra finger bones spilled and ticked over the sand like patient dice. When the breath the world had held let go, wind moved through 20 changed shapes as if asking what had occurred. Blood curled into slow spirals, neat as a tired calligrapher's strokes. An anklet bell rolled, chimed once and went still, 20 in, 20 gone. The surf took no names and left no bodies worth counting. The only witnesses were an old shoreman and his cat. He had nosed a skiff into the lee of Widow's Bench to soak a mackerel line. Hands rutted like driftwood, eyes filmed to tidal glass. The salt-slick cat slept in the net tub with a torn ear and a bell that never rang. He saw the ring close, heard the single chime, and set his oars flat without meaning to. For 12 waves, he did not blink. The cat woke, blinked once for him, and tucked its face under its tail. Later in the sheds, boys asked what he'd seen. "Not fast," he rasped. "Just done." He spilled half his catch at the drowned saint's bowl and left a bell rope, unknotted, in case the sea wished to say it again. The cat refused driftfish for a week and slept on the skiff's stern, watching the place where water forgot to move. Seiji exhaled, eyed his sword, and tilted the blade so sky slid along the faded Haemon. Still sharp, that's nice. In his head, too sharp. Let it sleep. A loud world needs soft edges. He stepped over the bodies, bit a strip of driftfish from a totem, chewed once, spat. Too salty. He rubbed his tongue. Salt's the sea trying to live in your mouth. Tea, he thought. Always tea. He tipped his hat to the totem. "You keep a kettle?" It kept only gulls and old prayer string. "Figures." He glanced at the dead without counting, an inventory of quiet, not respect. "Sorry," he said to the wind. "I was sitting. If you come again, bring tea." Then he lay down in the crook of a half-buried anchor and slept 2 days. Years later, a wandering scholar found the old bridge intact, carved with strange geometries, and an old bandit, gray, gap-toothed, stubborn as fungus, scrawling symbols at dusk. "Almost got it. Just need the 7th cosine to align with the plum phase," he muttered, certain that solving the sky equation would buy riches, enlightenment, or the perfect nap. Travelers left sake and chalk. A child asked what he was drawing. "Math you have to feel," he whispered. "Math that dreams when you forget it." No one believed him, but a plaque appeared. "Here, fools rebuilt sleep." The Blade Eaters never rose again, but the story did, on gull wings, in the mouths of half-mad fishermen, across ink-soaked bounty boards, to warlords who dreamed of death and feared the silence between footsteps. Once, in a riverside sack stall above the Komikawa weirs, Seiji sat 2 seats from the door, while a drum boy performed the slaughter at Widow's Bench. The Tsuzumi cracked like cheap thunder, and in the tail, lightning kissed a leaping blade, and 20 heads rolled laughing to sea. The crowd loved the noise. In the corner, an old shoreman with tidal glass eyes and a sleeping salt-slick cat winced whenever the boys said, "Fast." Seiji counted mistakes like dull beads and let them pass. Stories are the work of standing, he thought. Standing is tribute. He kept his hat low and his cup full of warm nothing. When the boy claimed the bell tolled a dozen times, Seiji said, soft enough the steam heard him first, once. "Were you there, Gramps?" the boy asked. "I was sitting," Seiji said. The room laughed. The cat did not. The old shoreman lifted 2 fingers. "Once," he added, dry as rope. Color rose in the boy's cheeks. His tail quieted at the edges, and for a few beats, The drum remembered silence between strikes. When the telling ended, Seiji slid a chipped glass sun beneath the drumstick. "Less thunder," he murmured. "More tea." Outside, the weirs spoke in their sleep. Inside, the story learned to breathe, if only for a night. Saint's Misstep, Hansa of 12 knots. It was a season after the Blade Eaters, when the current called Saint's Misstep ran black and fast around the harbor of Ket. A blockade boom of linked anchors and ironwood spars barred the throat. The magistrates swore it was to keep raiders out, but the drowned bell on the mole tolled twice that week for liars, and no storm had come. Refugees stacked like cordwood on the quay, watched the tide make and unmake their chances. Hansa of 12 knots sat on the slipway with a bowl of tar and a coil of weatherline. He was lean and wind-burned, eyes full of problem. He tied and untied without looking, laying loop over bite over hitch until the cord became a map. "Proof is just a rope you can walk," he told the crowd, though no one understood. Kite lanterns from Admiral Koji's old charts bobbed on their stakes, each a pale spine of current and wind. Seiji arrived sideways, as if the wind had misplaced him. He leaned against a bollard, hat low, watching the boom breathe with the tide. Hansa glanced up once, blinked, and slid the coil toward him. "Hold this," he said, "or don't. The knot will tell me which." Seiji put one finger on the free end. That was enough. Hansa walked his proof, around bollard to bollard, under the tarred hawser, through a fisherman's ring, over the cracked paw of a stone lion, whispering the names of the currents like apologies. Widow's Reach, the throat, misstep. When he pulled the final bite, the whole slipway seemed to inhale. "You're 2 breaths early," Seiji murmured, eyes on the boom. "Let it yawn." Slack water came like a blink. Seiji tapped his stick against the hawser once, not hard, just where salt had eaten one strand to gray hair. The sound was small and wooden. The effect was not. The boom took a longer breath, found the weakness the tap had named, and turned quiet into failure. A link whispered itself apart. The chain sighed. The sea did the rest, lifting, rolling, shouldering the ironwood aside in a slow, inevitable shrug. The drowned bell on the mole spoke once, low and pleased. From the tower, the magistrate's envoy shouted that the harbor was closed. The bell answered again, and every gull on the breakwater laughed. Boats slid out through the wound in the boom. Netters, lighters, a barge full of kitchen stoves and sleeping children. Hansa stood with his rope in his hands, smiling the way a gambler smiles at a coin landing on its rim. "Proof by boredom," he said. "I've been missing that one." Seiji yawned. "Tea." Hansa pointed at a kettle sitting on a brazier made from a split cannon. "Too hot." "Then we'll wait," Seiji said, settling on the bollard as if it were a pillow. The current shifted. The harbor remembered how to breathe, and the rope in Hansa's hands, not needing to prove anything for a while, finally went slack. Her name was Aminokinu, and she never wore the same skin twice. It was in the year when the riverlands were dying, when lotus bloomed black from poisoned waters and children were born with moth-colored eyes. The irrigation channels went tea-dark and sweet on the wind, like a cup forgotten too long. Frogs hatched eyeless, carp glinted with glassy scales. Bell walkers rang drowned bells at the locks as if sound could teach water to breathe again. Seiji wandered into the city of Gozu, a place ruled by courtesans, alchemists, and assassins, where knives were cleaner than politics, and the brothels had libraries larger than the temples. Filter towers coughed pale steam over canal roofs. Apothecaries poured offcuts into rain barrels and swore they were blessed. Tea houses pinned black lotus to their lintels to ward off false water, and the newborn, moth-born, blinked slowly behind gauze veils as midwives whispered prayers that were also bribes. He had no business there. He hated cities. Too loud, too full, too urgent. But it had rained for 8 days straight, and his clothes were wet, and his sag-gourd was empty. The rain climbed temple steps, melted paper charms to pulp, and beat the smell of camphor, lye, and copper out of every alley. So he drifted down the jade-lit streets, cobbles green with old lantern light, gutter canals carrying scabs of blackened petals, letting the red lanterns paint him in slow, drunken color. Oilcloth couriers splashed past with blue lantern scrip knotted under their coats. A tea seller bragged, pre-blight well, and charged double. A bell on the mole spoke once for a lie no one admitted to. He wore the storm like a second Haori, straw hat patched with silk and rain, fingerbone charm ticking his throat with each step. He tasted the water, grimaced and kept shuffling, because stillness is easier in motion when the world insists on noise. That was where he met Ame no Kinu. She was not the most beautiful woman in the House of Thorns. She was not the youngest or the most expensive. But she was the only one who didn't advertise. She kept no perfume signature on the air, no loot behind the screen, no hired laughter in the corridor. Her ledger lay face down, her fan closed. The gesture in Gozu that means leave if you must. I will not sell you. That refusal was the hook that Seiji could stomach, the lure that didn't move. His interest arrived the way he did, late, sideways, and only because she allowed silence to grow to a comfortable size. He liked that she named water by its provenance without being asked. North Cistern, 2 filters, and poured it at the right temperature for bad tea and good talk. He liked that she looked at his hat before his face, and at his sandals last, as if measuring how far he would not go. He liked that when a bell chimed somewhere below, she did not glance at the door. No advertisement meant no work. No work meant rest. Rest meant he could stay. So he did. The intrigue of a lazy man, to see how long he could be allowed to be nothing at all in her room, while she was perfectly something and unbothered by it. She sat alone in a high room, where clients had to climb 37 painted stairs to reach her. Stairs Seiji took an hour to ascend, pausing 3 times to drink. When he opened the sliding door to her room, she didn't rise, didn't bow, didn't offer sake or song or body. She looked at him and said, "I thought you'd be taller." Seiji scratched his neck. "I thought you'd be gone." "You took an hour for 37 steps," she said, not moving her hands, only her mouth. "I stopped," he said, "to see if they'd climb themselves." "Did they?" Disappointing. "Water," she offered, naming it as Gozu requires. North Cistern, 2 filters, clay warmed. "If it sits long enough," Seiji said, "it becomes tea." She tilted her head. "Name." He considered the ceiling. "If you need one, borrow mine." "Names are contracts." "Then leave the paper blank." A bell chimed once somewhere below. Neither of them looked at the door. "Someone lied downstairs," she murmured. "Saved me the trouble," he replied. Her fan stayed closed on the tatami, the Gozu sign for take what won't be sold. "What did you come to buy, Sloth?" 10 breaths without being asked to spend them. "Expensive. I can pay in not talking." She poured anyway. Steam ghosted between them. 81 degrees, she said. 80 is fine. 1 is for ambition. Her eyes tracked the sun-faded Haman at his hip. "Your blade sleeps." "Someone should." "They say you cut lightning." It was noisy. Her gaze drifted to the gold-painted fingerbone at his throat. A child's charm. A gift from someone good at leaving. Leaving has a price. So does staying. If I asked you to draw, she said, would you? Only curtains. If I kissed you, would you wake? Briefly. She set his cup closer by the rim, not the handle. A small courtesy in a city that measures intent. You don't look for things, she said. You wait for them to confess. Confession is just noise with timing. She almost smiled. I thought you'd be cruel. Not today. Stay, she said at last. He yawned. If you promise not to move. I change every night, she said. Skin, hair, eyes. Then do it quietly, he said, stepping inside, and at the same time. She was called a silkskin, a witch courtesan, trained in both the subtle blade and forbidden glamour. Her body changed nightly, shedding skin the way cicadas shed shells. Blonde one day, dark the next. Eyes like pearls one evening, like dried blood the next. Not illusion, not disguise. Something older, worse. In the House of Thorns, they said, she molts the names men give her. Her cast-off skins were folded like letters and knotted with red thread. Each kept a secret it had heard. She was not born in a registry. Midwives tell that a rain-night flood carried a reed basket into the dye canals. A girl inside wrapped in damp silk smelling of peppered plum and iron. They named her Amen no Kinu, rain silk, and raised her among perfumers and readers. She apprenticed in 3 crafts, sleeve code and arbitration, under matron Sayo. The subtle blade under Sister Imori, who taught her to cut fabric, not flesh. And forbidden glamour in the Alembic courts, where Master Kagan taught her to brew skins from breath and memory, and swore her never to lie within sound of a drowned bell. Her rules were plain and sharp, no advertisement, no contracts under bridges, in temples, or in midwives' rooms. Never take water you will not yourself drink. Never wear the same face twice for the same client. Keep the ledger face down. Accept gifts only as favors to be repaid, not owned. She kept to them even when it cost her coin, because rules are a skin, too. Work for her was curation. 37 painted stairs selected those who could be patient. She named water by provenance. North cistern, 2 filters, clay warmed, and poured silence until the room admitted what it wanted. The knife she kept was lacquered and small, used to free threads, not throats. When deaths followed her kisses, it was the work of tinctures and timing, not of steel. Once a royal line ended over a winter of visits. The city said poison. She said fatigue. The difference is mostly a calendar. About the skins. They were not illusion. She shed them like cicadas do, nightly, tidily, with the patience of a craftswoman. White ones she kept for letters and warnings. Colored ones she auctioned to alchemists for study. The rest she burned with perfumed salt so no one could wear her without her consent. Her ledger of mirrors, a book bound in lacquer and threaded with her own hair, held contract names, provenance of waters poured, and the debts she preferred to leave uncollected. Rumors insisted on grander origins, that she stole faces from the dead, that she was born in the mouth of a drowned god, that she was the ghost of the emperor's first wife, practicing survival as a habit. She never corrected any of it. In Gozu, myth is a better lock than iron. After the river-blight season, she left the house without scandal, burning her spare skins, paying every debt in favors, not coin. Sightings followed in the years after, each one carrying the quiet of her rules like a watermark. 11 gates, sandalwood silks. In the bell-stitched quarter, she rented a room above a rope maker's. She set a cup by the window at clay warm and named it aloud, then said nothing while the drowned bell on the mole tolled once for a lie below. She never spoke a house name within earshot. When a courier asked whom she awaited, she closed her fan once and turned it on its spine. Stay if you can. I will not sell you. By morning, the cup had cooled untouched. She left the skin that bled sandalwood in a brazier, then salted the knot. 9 rains, the bride without a shadow. Commissioned to teach a court the etiquette of vows, she refused all lessons held on bridges and in midwives' rooms. On the procession night, she chose a white skin, the only truth she still wore, and stood beneath plum, counting the pause between gusts. When blossoms landed on her wrist and did not fall, she whispered, "Not today," meaning both cruelty and search, and adjusted the bride's sleeve by a heartbeat so the fan could close with clean intention. The groom swore he saw her reflection hesitate. The drowned bell did not ring. The class of fans. In a warlord's manner, she taught daughters to speak with silk and wrist. She demonstrated the forbidden grace only once, the closed fan invitation she never put in curricula, and corrected a novice by a breath. Accuracy must be yours, not borrowed. She brewed water to 81, said, 80 is fine, and poured. At the 18th step of the manor stair, she paused, asked the air a question it did not answer, and climbed anyway, because work, not ghosts. Always a different face, always the same stillness. Of Seiji, she kept one relic, a tiny bite-mark scar on her own lower lip, pressed with gold dust, to remind herself that someone once answered her question without hurry. When asked whether she loved him, she replied, "Love is a word for work you do twice." Then she shed a skin and went to pour water, naming it carefully, as if accuracy were the only kindness left. Men said she stole the faces of the dead. Some said she was born in the mouth of a drowned god. Others whispered she was the ghost of the first wife the emperor ever killed. Seiji didn't care. She made good tea. They said nothing for 3 nights. On the first, he slept on her floor with his hat tipped over his eyes. She embroidered a sash with threads from her own hair and timed each stitch to his breathing. 8 slow beats, a tuck, a knot. When the drowned bell below chimed once for a lie, neither of them looked at the door. On the second, rain counted the eaves. She named the water again, North Cistern, 2 filters, and set it to clay warm while he adjusted his sword 2 finger widths so the Hammond wouldn't catch lantern light. Once, passing him, she let 2 knuckles trail the blade's spine, never asking, curious and unafraid. He did not tense. On the third, she laid a folded white skin beneath his cheek, like a pillow, and pricked her thumb to darken her thread. He turned on his side, and without waking, pushed her fan closed. The Gozu sign for leave if you must. I will not sell you. That was the closest they came to conversation. On the 4th night, she woke him with a kiss. She tasted of copper and plum. Sandalwood smoke clung to her hair. She touched 2 fingers to his throat as if taking a pulse and found only quiet. He opened one eye, the lazy eye he saved for weather and did not rise. She did not ask permission. He did not offer it. Between them, steam unscrolled from the kettle like a small, patient flag. She tasted like copper and plum wine. Her hands were always cool, even in heat. Her voice was low and never hurried, like someone narrating her own murder. She moved like she didn't need to breathe. Unhurried, inevitable. When she leaned closer, the room forgot its corners. He answered with the minimum required to be true. A shift of shoulder, the slow turn of a wrist, a line drawn, and then allowed to sleep. Like the blade he wielded, he chose only necessary motion. Nothing ornamental survived between them. They didn't speak of love. Neither believed in it. She counted the pause between his breaths, as if it were currency. He counted the ways she did not advertise herself, and found that number kinder than vows. But when she once asked, "Will you remember me?" he replied, without blinking, "If you make it difficult to forget." She smiled, bit his lip, lightly, a seal more than a wound, and promised, "Then I'll leave teeth in your chest." She left before the rains stopped. One night she was there, naked beneath a robe of wolfskin, humming a lullaby made of bones and wind. The next morning, nothing. Just an empty futon, a faint scent of burnt sandalwood, and a single white skin, shed and folded like a letter. On it, in her own blood, she'd written, "I tried on your name. It didn't fit me. Keep it." He never looked for her. He never needed to. Every few years when he passed through war camps or plague towns or haunted monasteries, he'd hear of her. The woman who wore no face twice, who made kings weep and poisoned an entire royal line with a kiss. He never asked questions, but sometimes, when sleeping beneath trees, he would wake to the scent of her perfume on the wind, and a single line of red across his chest, sharp and bloodless, like a kiss cut from memory. On the road he carried her the way he carried a blade, edge down, quiet, hidden. He did not polish the thought. He let it patina. When campfires asked for stories, he fed them fish and silence. When bells on bridges chimed once for a lie, he counted his breaths instead of names. In war camps, he poured water the way she had taught him without teaching, naming provenance under his breath. North cistern, 2 filters. Even when the cup was only rain caught in a helmet. Accuracy was a kind of loyalty. Men toasted victories. He toasted temperatures. In plague towns, he slept on rooftops and woke to sandalwood that wasn't there. He would put his palm flat to his chest and find the thin, red, bloodless line, her old promise or his old wish, and think, "Teeth in my chest," as agreed. Then he would roll over and let the wind erase the thought, like steam unscrolling from a kettle when no one is looking. In haunted monasteries, he kept 3 rules about her. First, never step into a city to ask for news. If she wished to be found, she would pour water and name it. Second, never speak her house name near a drowned bell. The river remembers. Third, if a staircase has 37 painted steps, climb them only if you meant to nap at the top. Some nights he measured distance in domestic units that belonged to her. The time a kettle takes to grow quiet. How long a sleeve keeps warmth after a cup is set down. The 3 heartbeat pause before a fan closes. Memory lived best as furniture, not as prayer. He did not tell himself stories where they met again. He audited possibilities the way a careful drinker weighs a cup. If she were in the room, she would have closed the fan. If she were behind him, the air would taste of peppered plum and iron. If she wished him awake, the water would already be clay warm. Since none of that occurred, he slept. He kept the white skin letter folded in his mind like a ledger page. Keep it. So he kept it. Her name, his, the gap between. On days when swords insisted on being honest, he let the gap be the sharpest thing he owned. And when the wind carried a rumor, silks that bled sandalwood at 11 gates, a bride without a shadow in the 9 rains, he did the laziest brave thing a man can do. He did nothing. He set his hat over his eyes and let the weather decide whether they were in the same world that day. What she allowed herself to think of him, moving through new skins. After she left, she rationed him the way apothecaries ration thunder, in tincture drops and rules. She did not collect men. She curated rooms. Of Seiji she kept allowances, not devotions. First rule, Never speak his house name where bells can hear. The river keeps receipts. If a drowned bell is within a street, she thinks of tea instead. Second, remember him only when measuring accuracy. When water warms, she lets his voice cross the rim. 80 is fine. 1 is for ambition, and still pours at 81. Accuracy must be hers, not borrowed. Third, if a staircase has 37 painted steps, she pauses at the 18th and asks the room a question with her fan. If the air answers by forgetting its corners, she closes the fan once and leaves. If not, she climbs. Work, not ghosts. She kept his bite on her lower lip, guilt and honest, a small weather vein. If it ached, she judged herself tired, not haunted. Either way, she poured water and named it. Naming was a kindness he would have understood. When clients reached for her lacquered knife, she let 2 knuckles trail the spine as she had once done to his blade, and waited for the muscle that did not tense. Comparison is a cheap poison. She dosed herself rarely. On molt nights, she chose white skin only for truth. Colored skins were for commerce, gray for escape. She did not write him letters. She folded silence into the knot that binds a cast-off skin, and burned the knot with perfumed salt. If smoke smelled faintly of peppered plum and iron, she opened a window and did nothing more. Rumors traveled faster than perfume, silks that bled sandalwood at 11 gates, a boy who learned to sleep standing, a bell that chimed once without a throat. When such talk reached her, she set a cup by the window at clay warm and named its provenance aloud. If it cooled untouched by morning, that was answer enough. In cities that hired her to teach fan speech, she hid one lesson from the curriculum: the closed fan grace that means stay if you can. I will not sell you. She kept that for rooms that remembered quiet. Once, a novice mirrored the gesture without knowing. A Minokinu corrected the angle by a heartbeat, and thought of him exactly the length of that correction. She permitted herself one indulgence in spring, to stand beneath plum and count the pause between gusts. If blossoms landed on her wrist and did not fall, she whispered not today, and meant both cruelty and search. She did not plan a reunion. Planning is advertisement by another name. If stillness wished to find her, it would. She would greet it by naming water, pouring accurately, and leaving the fan where he could close it without standing up. The child, the pupil, and the sloth. It is said that Seiji never wanted children. The rumor began in Mudbone, and wandered all the way to the lacquered courts. Innkeepers swore he turned sideways whenever a cradle entered a room, not out of hatred, but out of inconvenience. He once said, "A child cries. That's a kind of sword, too, but louder." On another tired afternoon, he added, "Parenthood is just dueling sleep with one arm tied." He carried no toys, kept no coins knotted for midwives, and learned exactly 3 lullabies, only to forget 2 on purpose. And yet, he had one. The day it changed, he was passing a shrine tree with frost still on its roots. Witnesses say the wind paused as if to listen for a name. What he found there would teach him the only discipline he never trained for: staying awake on purpose. The child. Her name was Ume, though he never spoke it aloud. She was born during the season of withering plums, when frost came early and dreams grew thin. Years earlier, on the night of split bells at the border shrine where 2 canals forgot which way to flow, Seiji slept on the offering steps with rain in his sleeves. A woman came barefoot from the reeds, a foreign priestess with a forked tongue and eyes that bled when she wept, carrying a clay kettle that breathed at 81 degrees. "I need an hour of stillness," she said. "No vows, no after." "You can have 2, he answered. if I don't have to stand." They kept the room quiet and the water honest. No names were traded, only temperatures. She traced the faded Haman at his hip with 2 knuckles. He moved once exactly enough to be true. What passed between them was less desire than weather, pressure equalizing, a lull settling over a storm that had run too long. When she rose, she set the kettle on its side so the steam would cool and said, "If a child comes of this, I will give her fire enough to walk alone. Then give her a nap, too," he murmured. "Fire is loud." Her mother, the foreign priestess, left the child swaddled in blue silk beneath a shrine tree, with a note written in 3 languages. "She has your stillness. She has my fire. Try not to ruin her." Seiji found her by accident. He stood beneath the tree for 5 hours, staring at her, then muttered, "You're quiet. Good start." He took her, not out of duty, not out of sentiment, simply because she was there, and leaving her would have taken more energy than carrying her. He wrapped her in the long sleeve of his robe and kept walking. She didn't cry once. The pupil. His name was Ren, a war orphan with a missing foot and a mouth full of reasons to fight. When Seiji found him, he was gnawing on tree bark during the siege of Komekawa Weir Town, one eye swollen shut, wielding a stick like it was holy. Why they besieged it was dull math, not glory. The Blue Lantern Syndicate had fronted seed and river tax to the magistrate 3 droughts ago. The Glass Emperor's hollow tithe demanded repayment in grain and children to fill regiments. The town refused both after the river-blight spoiled their cisterns, so ledgers marched where soldiers should have. Money owing became men with knives. Confessors in black lacquer sealed the gates to audit. Mercenaries cut the aqueduct to make the books balance. Temple bells rang once for lies and kept ringing until the ropes bled. Inside, people boiled harness leather and chewed bark. Ren had already traded his left foot to frost the cold winter before. He bit wood now to keep from eating his anger. Seiji slept under a broken cart until the noise insisted. He woke because the drum cadence was off by 1 beat. The kind of bookkeeping mistake that starts wars and ends childhoods. He listened again. 2 longs, 3 shorts, then a gap where silence should pay tax. Off by 1, he thought, is how hunger learns arithmetic. Under the cart, the dust was cool. If I stand, he bargained with himself, it will be to correct a ledger, not to join a song. He tasted the air for water. None. Heard the gate ropes cry. Twice. Confessors will cut the aqueduct next, he decided, and call it math. He let 1 more measure pass, counting breaths against drumskins. 4 held, 1 broken. Someone outside is cooking numbers with noise. He stood because someone else was miscounting. The boy attacked Seiji without provocation, shouting something about no gods, only blades. In his head, gods or blades, same noise. He noted the boy's stance, weight thrown onto the bad limb out of pride, not balance. Wrists too eager, breath riding the upbeats. Seiji parried the blow with his sandal. Use what's already near, he thought. Standing up is tribute I don't owe. Then said, "You're angry? That's boring." Anger is wind, he considered. It spends itself. Boredom survives. Ren followed him anyway, limped after him through ash-covered fields, across bridges thick with corpses, through ruined towns. He asked, begged, screamed to be taught. Seiji counted breaths instead of pleas. 4 short, 1 held. Fear pretending to be rage. Teaching is loud, measuring is quiet. Let him walk beside hunger until they recognize each other. Seiji ignored him for weeks, until one morning, as the sun cracked the sky in half, he dropped his sword at Ren's feet and said, "Carry this." You'll learn more from the weight than from me. Let the weight pare him down, he thought. If he can name weight, he can name movement. If he can name movement, he might stop swinging at noise. From that day on, Ren never let the sword out of reach. He never wielded it, only bore it, cleaned it, slept beside it. That was lesson 1. Good, Seiji thought. Let him sleep against what he thinks he wants. Desire dulls against habit. Lesson 2 came 6 months later, when Seiji made him build his own foot from scrap wood and leather, then spar with it, bleeding through every strike. They shaped it across 7 evenings. Pine core planed thin as patience, boiled leather cuff laced with fairy cord, a hinge stolen from a rice mill gate, 2 nails, lacquer, and a prayer not spoken. Day 1, it bit him. Good, Seiji thought. Learn the mouth of your road. Day 3, he walked a taut rope without looking, counting heartbeats per step until the rope counted him back. Day 5, he sanded until it forgot to chafe, reciting the winds by their work, harvest, fairy, funeral, starting over whenever anger outran breath. Day 7, he sparred on broken tiles, with his eyes closed while Seiji tapped the floor at odd intervals to move the world an inch. Author your ground, he decided. Borrowed bodies swing borrowed blades. Make him craft balance so he'll stop trying to buy it with rage. Pain, Seiji said, is just movement you haven't named yet. He did not add, once you name it, it leaves, embarrassed. Or sidebar, the Hollow Tithe and the Blue Lantern Syndicate. The Hollow Tithe, Imperial Levy. A 3-part levy imposed by the Glass Emperors to lighten rebellious provinces until only obedience remains, hollowing people before coffers. Components include grain, baseline 1/9 harvest, drought surge up to 1/3, bodies, every 40th household yields a conscript, second-born preferred, and quietus, an annual payment in bells, books, or relics to starve local cults. Assessment is handled by confessor auditors in black lacquer traveling with waymasters and temple scribes. Ledgers are glass-backed to show erased entries. The enforcement ladder runs from arrears to gate seals, audit closures, then water cuts, aqueduct pinch, hostages of account, magistrate's kin taken, silent march, labor press into road crews, and finally, tithe by sword, siege until the books balance. Exemptions are rare, quiet charters for towns that keep a bell that tolls only once for lies, or supply materials to imperial roads, charters that can be revoked mid-season. Blue Lantern Syndicate, private ledger lords. They advance seed, tools, and tax prepayments, convert village oaths into negotiable lantern marks, bank scrip. Typical water interest runs 12 to 18% per flood. Collateral is favors as much as goods, ferry pass chits, debt forgiveness, writs, salvage rights. They purchase delinquent hollow tithe notes at discount, then march those notes like banners, contract marshals, hired pike and court writs that make private debt look like imperial duty. In short, confessors, the state, seal gates, lanterns, the bank, cut the water. One claims law, the other claims arithmetic. Towns caught between pay twice or bleed once. Local workarounds include paying in kind, grain and rope instead of coin, hiding harvest under temple ritual stores, or bartering bridge right, repair a span to erase a season's interest. All are legal until someone changes the page. Together. They traveled the dust roads of a dying empire, 3 shadows bound by nothing but silence and hunger. Sometimes the road sounded like a bell swallowing lies. Sometimes it was only grit and the patient scuff of sandals. Ume rode on Seiji's back, tethered with silk and old prayer rope. She grew fast, too fast. By age 4, she was speaking 3 languages and carving symbols into stone with her nails. She watched everything. She never asked why. "Is the sky asleep?" she asked once, chin on his shoulder. "Only pretending," he said, "like you." "Exactly." Ren walked behind them always. By age 11, he was taller than Seiji, sharper too. Too angry, too eager, but loyal in that broken dog way. He hated the world with open teeth. "How far?" he would demand. "Until the boredom grows teeth," Seiji replied. "It already has. Then we're close." They lived in abandoned watchtowers, in forgotten inns where the wind slept between floorboards. Seiji taught neither of them directly. He only existed, and they learned by osmosis. In a watchtower with a roof like a broken bowl, Seiji set a bowl of water on Ren's head and pointed at the stair. "Up, don't spill." "Why?" "Because falling is honest." Ume sat on the step below and carved a circle with 3 missing teeth into the stone. "What's that?" Ren grunted, wobbling. "A moon that forgot itself," she said. "Don't spill." Some days he would not speak. Some weeks he would not move. "Is he dead?" Ren would whisper. "No," said. "He's being heavy." Other days he would wake at dawn and spar Ren until the boy's arms failed, or hold Um's hand while she stared at the stars and told him how many gods had died that night. 3, she said once, under a sky that smelled of iron and rain. "Name them," Seiji murmured. "The god of shortcuts, the god of borrowed knives, and the god of applause." Ren, face down in the dust after a throw, groaned. "Leave one for me." "Take applause," Seiji said. "It dies easy." When Ume killed. Her first kill was not an accident. She was 8. On a market day, under prayer flags and steam, hawkers sang salt and sesame, kettles hissed. A bell on the mole spoke once for a lie no one claimed. The priest of the azure flame, saffron sash, coal brand on his throat, fingers ringed like small altars, stooped and reached to bless the quiet child, tracing circles in dust. His hand kept coming after she stepped back. He smelled of camphor and tallow. "Little moth," he said, "come closer." Did not. She counted his pulse in his neck, 4 fast, 1 greedy, then lifted 2 fingers and turned his wrist away, with the smallest refusal in the world. "No," she said, as if correcting a number. He grabbed. She breathed in once, slow, and pressed a knuckle lightly beneath his ear, an unassuming touch that taught his breath how to stop. Heat gathered with the neatness of a lit taper. His prayer sash browned, then smoked. The air around his mouth went dry. He tried to say the god's name and coughed cinders instead. Seiji was asleep on a roof. When he awoke, Ume was sitting beside a smoking corpse, calmly sucking ash from her fingers. Seiji did not scold her, did not speak. He stared at the body, then at her. In his head, praise teaches pride, correction teaches quiet. First rule after blood, reduce noise, and said only, "Next time, faster, there's a mess." She nodded. "Stand," he added, voice low. "Hands." She offered them ash-rimmed. He sniffed. Camphor, tallow, fear. In his head, clean, name forget, ethics later, if later comes. They walked to the canal stairs in the lee of the mole. He bought a kettle from a tea cellar with a chipped glass sun, tipped the lid, and waited for the first honest steam. "Name the water," he said. "South cistern," she answered, steady. "1 filter, clay warm." "Good. Wash. Fingers first, tongue last." She scrubbed until the ash made no stories. He watched the current take what was left, and thought, accuracy is mercy. Don't make the city carry more than it must. On the way back, he paused at the drowned saint's bowl and dropped a coin and a ring he'd slipped from the priest's hand. "For the harbor," he said, "so it doesn't remember badly." Am I in trouble? Asked. Only with mess. He lied, she said. The bell knew. They returned to the square. He pulled the saffron sash over the priest's face, set the hands flat, and nudged the body into the shadow of a pillar where the bellwalkers would find it before flies did. 3 rules, he said as they left. Do it clean, do it quiet, don't collect names. Clean, quiet, she repeated. No names. He nodded once, then tipped his hat toward the tea cellar. 2 cups, he said. 80 is fine. They drank in the shade while the square remembered how to talk again. When Ren left. At 16, Ren had already blooded the southern circuits. At Komakawa's Pepper Gate, he dropped 6 masters in 6 breaths. On the Reedway Ferry Pier, he flowed through a hedge of spear points as the tide sucked back, twisted hafts with his offhand, hooked a heel, and left 8 men flat on the planks, blinking up at gulls. Under Gozu's jade lanterns, he folded the White Tiger champion with a single hilt break. At Black Salt Ford, he unseated horse and rider in one rising stroke. And in the basalt rings of Saran's ruins, he fought until the sand darkened, and the crowd forgot to cheer. He had taken Seiji's style and inverted it. Where Seiji was minimal, Ren was violent. Where Seiji whispered, Ren screamed. He left without ceremony, wrapped in the cloak Seiji never wore, at a dawn that couldn't decide on a color. They were camped in a culvert beneath a ruined bridge. Dew beaded the rope scars on the crossbeam, and the road above hummed with carts that hadn't learned their own weight. Ren wore the cloak, stiff with old rain, patched with fairy cord. He had packed in the dark, loud on purpose. He set Seiji's sword on the ground between them, palms open, not touching the hilt. Ume watched from the bridge's shadow with a plum pit in her cheek, saying nothing. Before he left, he asked, "Am I your legacy?" "No," Seiji replied. "You're your own mess." Ren snorted. "Then what did you make?" "A man who can carry weight without asking the road's permission." He swallowed. Pride tasted like rust. "And the girl? She's the sword I never drew." Uma finally spoke, voice thin as kettle steam. "Don't sharpen easy things." Ren glanced at her hand on the sword's scabbard, then looked away. "Teach her not to wait for thunder." "She already doesn't," Seiji said. "Neither should you." "Give me one more rule," Ren demanded. "Something that isn't a riddle." Seiji considered the sky, which was trying to be blue and failing. In his head, praise is a leash, instructions are noise, give him only what ends. Aloud, don't fight to win, end what needs ending, leave what's already quiet. Ren stared at the blade on the ground, as if it might answer instead. "I thought I'd carry it forever." "You carried it correctly," Seiji said. "You put it down." Stepped forward, tugged his cloak straight, then smudged his cheek with her thumb. "Don't spill," she whispered. Seiji's old watchtower lesson turned into a blessing. Ren bowed once. He took 3 steps, limped a 4th, then stopped and didn't turn back. "Which way?" he asked, eyes on the road. "The boring way," Seiji said. "It leaves fewer echoes." "Figures," Ren laughed without humor. He lifted his pack and went toward the road that argued least. He was never seen again by them. After. Seiji and Ume stayed together for many years. They moved like weather, ferry to ferry along tea-brown canals, salt step to wind bridge, shrine ruins to market roofs. He taught her the names of water and the price of noise. She taught him which silences had edges. At the toll of 7 ropes, lantern men barred a rope bridge with pikes and paper writs. "Fee doubled. War surcharge?" Ume looked at Seiji. "Do we pay?" "We pay the quiet," he said, lowering his hat over his eyes. The tallest guard jabbed. Stepped into the space his breath left, slid 2 fingers along the shaft, and turned the pike into a question pointing back at its owner. Another lunged. She tapped his elbow and let his arm forget its job. Ropes thrummed, coins clinked, but only in the collection bowl she tipped into the river. "Name it," Seiji murmured. "North Cistern, 1 filter, cold. Good, cross." Outside Gozu, 3 knife dancers tried the alley trade. Silk masks, lacquered blades, confidence for choreography. "Pretty," said, setting her bundle down. "Step back," Seiji told her. "Let struck things arrive." One spun for her throat. She lowered her chin and let the blade spend itself on air. Another reached for her wrist. She gave him the wrong wrist and the right angle. The third hesitated, saw nothing to cut, and lost to doubt. "Rules?" Seiji asked when they ran. "Clean, quiet, no names." "Add 1. Don't teach with blood if posture will do." On the snow steps of Tsumori Pass, wolf priests barred a bell gate and demanded breath as tithe. "I'm short," Seiji yawned. Ume held out a palm. "Listen, your bell is lying." She struck the gate once. The toll came honest, and 3 priests flinched at their oaths returning to them. No swords, only the embarrassment of sound telling the truth. "Mercy?" she asked. "Leave what's already quiet," Seiji answered. At Widow's Ferry, a drunk lordling boxed a ferry girl's ear. Um's jaw set. "Wait," Seiji said. "Count to 4 and answer the 5th. On the 5th breath, she lifted the lordling's cup, sniffed and poured it out between his boots. Bad water. He swung. She let his own momentum choose the ground for him. No blood, no echo. Later by the brazier, she asked what mercy was. Accuracy turned toward the living, he said. Don't mistake spectacle for justice. They wrote lessons into travel like knots. Keep a coin for the drowned saints. Speak soft near bridges. Sleep with your feet toward exits. Boil water long enough for apologies. At dusk, when she sparred, he tapped the ground at odd intervals to move the world an inch. At noon, when she fought, he told her which shadow lied. If she won, he adjusted her grip by a breath. If she lost, he adjusted the ground. "Am I a sword?" she asked once beneath a plum. "You're the pause," he said. "Let others prove they're the noise." She grew cold, never cruel, precise. She forged a language of her own, a grammar of temperatures, fan angles, pauses, and breath counts. Seiji understood it without trying. He preferred answers that could be done lying down, tilts, taps, and one-word weather. North Cistern, 2 filters, clay warm. Question, she would say at a tea stall, setting 2 cups, like punctuation. Answer nap, he replied. Counter, later. Approved. In an alley before trouble? Signal, 3 shadows. Cadence, drunk. Distance, 5. 2 taps. 4, when they forget to breathe. On a rope bridge, fan half closed. East wind. Rope sings. Cross on the side. At a bell gate. Toll, 1. Lie, present. Then we're paid. When a ferryman asked if he spoke her tongue, Seiji said, enough to be silent. On long afternoons, she read grimoires aloud in tongues the land had forgotten, while Seiji napped with his head in her lap, hat tilted to shade his eyes. Pages smelled of ash and brine. Her finger traced sickle-shaped sigils. His breathing kept lazy time like a bell that refused to hurry. Translate? He would mumble. No, just listen. The words know we're here. Wake me if one tries to bite. Sometimes she braided a ribbon through his hair to mark a page. Sometimes he weighed a curling leaf with 2 fingers so the wind wouldn't steal the sentence. When a line cut her thumb, he huffed once. Bad book, and handed the finger back as if the pain had been negotiated away. You don't like my books, she'd tease. I like your voice, he'd answer, and mean it. He was a different kind of person, soft where she was precise, idle where she was edged, and she adored her father, without advertisement. She straightened his hat when the breeze argued with it, warmed his tea to clay, warm without being asked, and counted his breaths the way a bell-walker counts tolls. Read the line about doors again, he'd murmur. The one that opens only if you forget why you wanted it, she'd say. Good door, he'd decide, and go on sleeping. Some say she became a witch queen. Some say she outlived Seiji and buried him beneath a tree that bloomed only in dreams. Others say she was never real, just a curse that learned to walk and called him father to see what he would do. Blood in the dust, Ren's first failure. They camped in a valley of bone grass, where the wind hissed like teeth over stone, and the moon hung sick and yellow. The land had burned 3 times, first by war, when a confessor-led levy set the bone grass alight to balance the hollow tithe, drawing fire breaks with pikes and ledgers until granaries and prayer flags burned in the same breath. Second by gods, when the lightning beast Atlas came down out of a cobalt storm, antlers webbed with living lightning, hooves fusing sand to bottle green glass as it stamped a thunder road that still hums before rain. And third by accident, when a pilgrim's kite lantern, blown off course in drought, snagged in the dead stalks and ran oil fire along old war lines and Atlas glass until the Abbey's salt wagons burst and turned the blaze white. Nothing grew straight. Trees twisted in on themselves like they regretted ever rising. Ren stood barefoot, good foot on bottle green Atlas glass that hummed before rain, the other strapped into wood and leather that bit his stump. Shirt soaked with blood that wasn't his, a half-drawn sword trembling in his fist. His face was pale beneath the dirt, jaw locked like a vice, teeth pink with spit and shame, and the thoughts came anyway. I choked. She watched me choke. Clean, quiet, no names, Seiji says. Then why is the only name in my head my own? Tolling like a bad bell. The valley wears 3 burnings, and so do I. War smoke in the throat, want. God glass underfoot, fear. Lantern salt in the nose, mercy. Which one was hers? Which one is mine? I reached for an ending and found a pause. I raised thunder, and she answered with a smile. If a spy can walk away from my blade, am I carrying steel, or just the weight of it? Seiji reclined against a termite-eaten stump, eyes half-lidded, chewing the last of a dried persimmon. He'd watched it all, said nothing, didn't move. The woman Ren had meant to kill lay on the hill behind them. She hadn't even run, only looked at Ren with a long, world-worn stare that made a boy feel nothing he did could matter. He had raised the blade, screamed until his throat cracked, then hesitated, long enough for her to smile and walk away. Ren stood now, chest heaving, knuckles white on the hilt, stunned to see Seiji after so many years, impossibly unchanged. The same Sugagasa-shadowed eyes, the same lazy breath, the same unbearable calm that made him feel 12 again. Why didn't you stop me? Seiji blinked. Didn't have to. I froze. I should have cut her throat. She was a spy. She was feeding names to the black confessors. We could all be dead by tomorrow. Then she wins faster. Ren's teeth snapped. What does that mean? Seiji sighed, and Ren's body remembered that sound. Dawn under a culvert, rope scars on a bridge beam, the peppered plum of clay-warm water at 81, a Sugagasa dripping one patient drop at a time. The last morning he watched Seiji walk away without looking back. Seiji swallowed the last bite and wiped his mouth on his sleeve like it mattered. It means she took something from you you weren't ready to give, and you let her. I didn't let... Rage bloomed beneath Ren's ribs, sudden and suffocating. I wanted to kill her. Wanting's not the same as doing. Then teach me. Gods damn you, Seiji. Teach me how to finish something. That drew the briefest flicker of a glance. You think I hold your hand because you carry my sword. Ren stepped forward, half mad with failure, and the ache of disappointment curled tight behind his eyes. I've bled for you. I've starved beside you. I've slept in your godless silence and tried to understand a single thing you believe in. And you let me walk into that kill knowing I'd choke, knowing I wasn't ready. Seiji didn't blink. You thought she'd die for your sake. He leaned his head back, watching the stars through cracked branches. No one dies for you, boy. They only die when they're done living. Ren trembled, tears and sweat and blood stinging his face. So what do I do now? Seiji closed his eyes, hands folded on his stomach like a corpse waiting for burial. Now you live with the knowing. That's harder than killing most days. Silence stretched, the kind that felt final. Ren dropped the sword. It hit the dirt with a sound softer than it deserved. He sat cross-legged across from Seiji and stared like a dog trying to understand thunder. What was your first kill? Seiji didn't answer for a long time. Then, a man who asked the same question. Ren looked at him and waited. Seiji had already started snoring. The silent years of Seiji. A chronicle of battles, murders, and inconveniences, as fought and survived by Seiji of the dust-hung blade, from age 17 to 86. 1. The Ash Bloom Duel, age 17. His first true duel, a priest swordsman of the Eastern Orchid sect challenged him in the middle of a funeral procession, insulted his slouch, and spat on his blade. Seiji didn't speak. He cut the man so quickly that the wound didn't bleed until he was halfway through a monologue about balance and grace. The mourners, thinking it part of the rite, applauded. The corpse in the coffin wept blood. By morning, the blossoms on the nearby tree had turned black. 2. The Broken City, age 21. A month-long siege which Seiji slept through in a wine cellar beneath a collapsed apothecary. When the enemy army finally broke through the gates, their general, a giant woman with molten armor and teeth filed to points, found Seiji using her wanted poster as a napkin. She screamed and charged. He flicked a bottle cap at her. It severed her neck. No one saw how. The city guards made him honorary commander. He immediately abdicated and walked into the river. 3. The Night of the 88 Blades, age 29. A trap. 88 assassins from the glass-cut Brotherhood ambushed him in a bathhouse, perfectly synchronized, each with a different style, announcing their intent with rehearsed precision. Seiji was soaking, one eye open, half hard. He sighed. You'll make me dry off? They attacked. 7 minutes later, the bathhouse was red fog. The water never stopped steaming. Seiji left wearing someone else's robe and said nothing. 4. The Mountain Pact Massacre, age 34. Not a duel, a betrayal. Hired by 3 warring clans to enforce a peace treaty in a mountaintop monastery, Seiji found that each had brought poison and planned to kill the others. He arrived early, drew a line across the wooden floor and said, "Whoever crosses this line dies." The patriarch of the Gold Pig clan laughed and stepped over. He died instantly. Nothing touched him. The rest sat down, signed the treaty, and no one spoke the whole way down the mountain. 5. The City of Puppets, age 42. A cult-run city of marionette-controlled citizens hung from bone thread was ruled by a child with no eyes and a crown made from the scalps of his mothers. Passing through, Seiji moved his sword once, a single circle, and every string snapped, The city collapsed in silence. He picked up a flute carved from the tibia of a war criminal, played one note, and tossed it into the sea. 6. The Black War, ages 50 to 53. 3 years of constant war under 7 banners. Each one fell. He never led a unit, never accepted rank. They called him the Unspoken Blade. His mere presence in a trench meant survival, and though he gave no orders, soldiers followed his sleep patterns like doctrine. When a cursed war engine, the womb of swords, awoke and crawled across the plains, spitting dead knights from its flanks, Seiji walked directly into its shadow. He exited a day later. It never birthed anything again. 7. Duel at Mirror Lake, age 61. His opponent was Masami the Eternal Reflection, a woman who mirrored the style and speed of any opponent perfectly, even their heartbeat. The duel was silent, slow, and horrifying to watch. They moved identically. Every feint met, every shift countered. By the end, no one could tell them apart, except that Seiji got tired. He yawned mid-swing. She hesitated, confused. That was all it took. She fell into the water and drowned in her own reflection. 8. The one he lost, age 66. A girl, no more than 16, silent, sharp, eyes like dead stars, attacked him in a village where no one spoke names. She didn't challenge or posture, she simply struck. Seiji parried, slipped, and cut his thumb. She left without another blow. He watched her walk away, smiled, and said nothing. Later they called her the Daughter of Dust. He never looked for her, but he sharpened his blade the next day. The first time in years. 9. The Feast of Bones, age 72. Found asleep in a crypt during a necromancer's resurrection ritual, after the cult had gathered corpses for 12 years, Seiji used one corpse as a pillow. When the dead rose, he stood, adjusted his robes, and made one cut. The spell shattered. The dead fell like rotted fruit. Years later, the necromancer was found blind and tongueless, muttering Seiji's name in blood across cave walls. 10. The Siege of Hollow God, age 78. A living cathedral, a war god made of prayer and regret, demanded champions. Seiji was not among the volunteers, but when the others died, screaming, and were folded into stained glass torment, he stepped into the altar chamber. He did not fight the god. He spoke. No one knows what he said, but the cathedral fell silent forever. Its bells rang once, a funeral note heard across 7 kingdoms. 11. The final duel that wasn't, age 86. A young swordsman, bright-eyed, polished, with a blade kissed by lightning, found Seiji fishing by a dead river. He bowed, spoke poetry, declared his bloodline, called Seiji Master of the Sleeping Cut, and demanded a final duel. Seiji looked at the fish, then at the swordsman, and said, "I'm tired. Go kill someone else." The boy attacked anyway. Seiji didn't move. The boy stopped mid-strike, fell to his knees, and wept, saying he saw the end of all things in Seiji's stillness. Seiji offered him a fish. They ate in silence. The boy never drew again. After. No one knows where Seiji died. Some say he became a sword himself, buried in the earth until only the worthy can draw him. Others say he still sleeps somewhere beneath a willow tree, dreaming a war that will never come. But in every battle where silence precedes blood, they still say, "Don't wake the sleeping blade." How Seiji died, at the age of 91, beneath the blossoms. It was spring in the southern prefectures, the kind of spring that made even the ghosts pause to admire the breeze. Plum trees bloomed in soft explosions of color, petals the shade of old bruises. The sky the gentle blue of porcelain teacups. Birds chirped like they'd never seen war. Somewhere, a distant temple bell rang once, for no one in particular, and Seiji was drunk. Truly, beautifully, unapologetically drunk. He had stolen a bottle of plum wine from a traveling merchant 3 days prior, gave nothing in return but a shrug and a whispered lie about taxes. The bottle had warmed in the sun, half full. The wine inside soured slightly, as if fermenting into something more ancient than alcohol. He lay beneath a plum tree older than most provinces, its trunk twisted like a question no one had asked in a century. Petals fell on his robe, his hair, his weathered blade, still by his side, though it hadn't been drawn in over a year. Not because he couldn't, simply because he hadn't felt like it. He had no ailments, no wound, no curse. His bones ached, yes, but gently, like old friends asking if he was still around. Ume had visited a month before, leaving pickled radish and a letter folded in gold thread paper he never read. Ren hadn't been seen in 20 years, but Seiji swore he heard the boys limp in the wind sometimes. That afternoon, a farmer passed by and saw him lying there, sword across his lap, bottle at his lips, eyes half shut. "Master Seiji?" the farmer asked, bowing instinctively. "Do you need anything?" Seiji opened one eye, looked at the sky. The wind carried the smell of sweet rot and warm dust. He took one last sip. "No, everything's finally slow enough." He closed his eyes again. The wind sighed, and he died. No drama. No last breath whispered like prophecy. No final blow, no final duel. Just was, and then wasn't. A plum blossom landed on his chest, and did not fall. After. They buried him beneath that tree, though no one could say who did it. The sword vanished. The wine bottle remained. A small wooden marker was left, etched with a single word: enough. Years later, warriors still came, offering duels to a ghost they hoped would stir. None ever did. But all left with one thing: a strange, deep tiredness, the kind only a man who had truly finished living could leave behind. Epilogue, after the lazy blades slept. The witch who carried no name. She traveled east, into the lands where the rivers no longer remembered their names, and the moon was wrong half the month. They called her Daughter of the Blade that never slew, and she never corrected them. Her body was marked with small, precise scars, each one made by her own hand, part of an alphabet no one else could read. Her voice could freeze birds mid-flight. She did not wear armor. She wore Seiji's silences like a cloak. In the ruins of Shioka, she was ambushed by 6 monk butchers who drank boiling tar and sang to their blades. She let them surround her. When they struck, she didn't move. Instead, she said, "If you think the first cut kills me, you're too alive to understand me." Then her hands moved, not like a fighter's, but like a woman wringing water from a ghost. They collapsed, all 6, every bone inside them reversed. No blood, no screams, just folding. She sat on the last one's chest and whispered, "He never taught me how to win. He only taught me how to wait." In time, she vanished into the northern mists. People said she ruled a kingdom of mirrors, where the only law was stillness, where swords rusted just by being looked at, where silence was sacred, and those who spoke without purpose lost their names. She wrote no books, took no lovers, left no heir. But once a year she returned to the plum tree, just once, never more than an hour, and always left behind a cup of wine, half full, still warm. Ren the Blade without a master. Ren's path was fire. He never carried Seiji's sword, only a replica he'd forged himself, uglier, heavier, honest. He fought in the 10-year War of Ashwakes, slew a duke on the battlefield unarmed, killed a demon general with a rusted cooking pot, and lost an eye to a cursed relic that spat ancestral hatred. His style was his own, blunt, brutal, efficient, but the core of Seiji's teaching clung to him like a scar under the skin. Never fight to win, only fight to end. In the duel at Black Hollow, his opponent was a duel-mad prince with fire in his veins and a sword that sang prophecies. They circled for hours. Ren said nothing. The prince spat blood and asked, "Are you afraid of death?" Ren answered, "No, I'm afraid I'll have to kill again." Then he broke the prince's jaw with the hilt, never drew, and walked away. Ren never stayed anywhere long. He buried kings. He spared monsters. He taught no one. But his name grew. Not as a swordsman, but as a man who had once learned from Seiji. That was enough. Old soldiers claimed he once wept at the sight of a flowering plum. He denied it, but he never fought in spring. They never saw each other again. But every year when plum petals fall out of season, somewhere a silent witch sharpens her silence. A warrior walks away from another war, and beneath an old tree a breeze stirs the fallen blossoms as if something somewhere exhaled. The last crossing. They met only once after Seiji died, on a windswept hill in the Shadow Ridge. No words were needed, just pale and sharp, and Ren, older and limping harder, both staring at a grave marked not by stone, but by a solitary tree. They sat together, shared a bottle, and in a quiet gesture, Ren offered her the sword he had forged. She refused, whispering, "Too heavy. He never would have lifted it." They drank, gazed at the sky, and before parting, Ren asked, "Did he love us, you think?" Uma only shrugged. "He let us stay. That's close. Thanks for venturing into the storm with me. Every tale in this universe, from the shattered kingdoms to the cursed bloodlines, I write myself. All the art, all the visuals, every drop of atmosphere you feel. That's shaped by hand and pieced together with my passion to create. These stories take a lot of time to make real. So thank you for your patience when the drops take longer than I'd like. If you felt something during this journey, if you got goosebumps, held your breath, or just needed a break from the noise of the real world, do me a solid, like the video, subscribe for more, and share it with a nerdy friend who needs to touch grass, or get scorched by Atlas's lightning. Your support keeps this storm alive.